I do think that there's something to the red blood cell life. And I do think that could be a reason why we're seeing a little bit of like difference between what we're seeing from people's like fasted blood sugar versus like an A1C. But one of the things I'm always, before I jump to a more complex explanation of a problem, I always kind of want to look at a more simple explanation. I think generally speaking, most people are testing their blood sugar at the wrong time of the day. I think a lot of people are getting in the habit of testing first thing in the morning, where maybe they're subjecting themselves to the dawn effect, which is, we know, is your blood sugar spiking as your body is producing cortisol naturally, a part of your circadian rhythms. So that could be a reason why you're seeing that spike. You could see higher blood sugar after even a keto friendly meal, because we know that even if you were to eat the most keto friendly meal, you may still see a moderate increase in your blood glucose levels. You talk about during exercise or after exercise, we may see higher blood sugar levels. So and that kind of highlights another reason why people on keto may have generally speaking may still have higher blood glucose levels, is because cortisol is the hormone that's important here, right? So when you exercise, that's one of the big reasons why your body's kind of triggering this as an opportunity where you need to be physically present, you need to be physically engaged. So cortisol is a hormone that will spike, which will help release stored glycogen in the body. It'll start shuttling glucose out so you can use it for energy, and this is generally a good thing. Our ancestors living on the savannah, it would have been, they see a lion and they need to run from it. So cortisol spikes, and they have this parasympathetic response, and it's a great thing. But a lot of us today are living in this environment all of the time, even when we don't know it or feel it. We're stressed on the way to work. We're stressed about our finances. We have our phones at all times. We're using our phones before bed, which is spiking our cortisol levels. So I kind of think that may be a reason why we're seeing it. I think there could be something to this red blood cell life. And I'm not totally ready to discredit that. But for most people, I would say, it may be something else that's causing you to have this, either, the single time point of a higher blood sugar reading, or just kind of chronically not seeing your blood sugar levels get in check despite eating a low carb diet.
Yeah, we just interviewed the author of a paper, and I'm blanking on his name right now, apologize, but he was from the UK and he did a study looking at low carb diets, high protein, low carb diets. You may have saw in the paper. The headline, the headline basically said that meat causes men to be sterile, which is just ridiculous. Ridiculous, because it had an impact on testosterone. But one of the things he looked at was cortisol levels, and he found that outside of a 3 week effect, the fasting cortisol levels were pretty much unaffected. In the initial transition period, we saw elevations in cortisol, but I believe after exercise, you continued to see an increase in cortisol, uh, you know, in a low carb state, just probably because we need those kind of regulatory mechanisms to drive glycogenolysis, so you can access the blood sugar. I think
Hmm.
so. I don't know if there's some impact on that. Again, I think a lot of this stuff is still very much unknown. I know back on the red blood cell life, I know fructosamine will often sort that out. Fructosamine is an alternate way to check, chronic glucose levels over, I think it's about a 3 week period, I think, something like that. Let me ask
Yeah.
you about performance, because, I heard it all the time. You're not going to be able to do jujitsu. You're not going to be able to do this. And I just do. I'm like, yeah, yeah, sure. And I end up doing it. And, despite not having any significant carbohydrate in my diet, I'm able to perform even in highly glycolytic exercises, like setting world records in rowing and doing jujitsu and weightlifting and all these things.
Hmm.
Still be able to do it. What does the research show? I know some of like the short-term research, like Louise Burke and others, will say that low carb diets are awful for performance. They're not awful, but
Yeah.
substandard performance compared to carbs. Are we seeing equivalents in some areas, or is it like a lot of the critics will say, "Hey, man, you just need to test people for longer. You need to do a 3 week, 3 month, 6 month study and see." But are we seeing any of that bearing out now? Those assumptions.
Yeah, we're starting to see some improvements in it. I remember when I first got into the space, it was like, people would say, keto is good for endurance, but that's it. There's no other utility for it. But you started looking at the studies, and it was kind of obvious that like these research studies were either set up to find what they found, or they just weren't set up properly to really bring out all the benefits of a keto diet. And like one of them that you said is not allowing enough time. I know like a bunch of the studies, a few years ago that people would use would be like 5 day studies where they would like put somebody on a keto diet for like 3 days, and then they would test their performance measures. And anybody who's done a low carb diet knows very well that like that's that first part, especially when you're new to it, is when you're least likely to even be motivated to go to the gym and work out, let alone like set good numbers, right? So, that was a big issue. But then we also, there was a lot of not adjusting the diet for the goal, right? So you would see these studies where they were incredibly low protein. One of the studies I know that was published a couple of years ago was looking at keto diet in men and women who were resistance training, and in the men particularly, because they were lifting 3 or 4 times a week. It was like a 12-week study. They lost muscle mass, and then so people would take the study and say, "Oh, keto is bad for muscle mass, so it can't be good for strength sports." And then you would look at the study and be like, "Well, they were eating 20% protein, right? Like you didn't adjust." The calories or the macronutrients to accommodate what the goals were. So there's not a whole lot of study. And a lot of this is because in research, you kind of have to classify, like there's different classifications, right? Like low carb is considered less than 120 grams. Keto, for some reason, is considered, this certain macronutrient ratio or fat to protein ratio. So a lot of these times they're trying to use these protocols that are used for therapeutics like epilepsy or diabetes, any of these other conditions, and they're not applying it directly for sports performance. So I mean, there are a handful of studies out there I think that have done a better job, but I think the better place to look is just anecdotally and into like into the community for who's seeing positive results, right? I mean, for me personally, I played college basketball. I was a high carb athlete when I was playing college basketball. I still play basketball today, and I feel way better than I ever did. I'm 10 years older than I was when I was an undergrad, and I have less joint inflammation. I'm faster. I have a better vertical than I had when I was in college. Like all of these things have improved, right? So obviously that's anecdotally, but start talking to other people. Like, we talk to people who are set like yourself who are setting crazy numbers, right? We see like folks like Zach Bitter who have like the record for the ultra marathon running. We see folks like the Bell brothers who are who have followed low carb diets and are incredibly strong, and they're doing power conditioning and stuff like that. So I just I think that we're not looking at the right areas to see the impact that keto can have on these people. But the other thing I'm always hesitant to is like a lot of the research, we're not looking at general population, right? So if you're talking about an elite athlete, right, like you're talking about LeBron James, you're talking about, so I'm more of a basketball guy, so I'll probably just rattle off basketball guys, but you're talking these elite athletes, their bodies are incredibly insulin sensitive, most of them. They're well primed. They have a combination of good genetics plus good work ethic, and the fact that they're working out all the time. They are primed to be able to like take carbs in and utilize them, right? So for them, carbs can definitely provide an ergogenic aid, and we would expect a boost in performance. But for the general population, one, if you're insulin resistant, those carbs aren't going to provide much benefit. And actually, for most people, they're going to make you more sluggish. They're going to, maybe make you a little bit more bloated. So if you're doing them like pre-workout, you're not going to see a boost in performance. So for the general population, which I include myself in that, when we take carbohydrates out and we just eat a clean diet, we eat more protein rich foods, we see tremendous improvements. I think Rachel Gregory was a gal who did a great study back in 2016 where she kind of did this. It was like a 6-week study, I think, where she took just regular people and put them on, they were CrossFitters, and she put them on a keto diet, and she said go do CrossFit, and all of their numbers got better because these were people who were previously eating horribly, and now they're eating a lot better. So I think you kind of can simplify it down to that, right? If you are not metabolically healthy, then carbs aren't going to be providing you a benefit. And we know that through improving your metabolism, you're going to be burning energy better. So that's going to be more fuel for better performance. So I think it's kind of logically we can say that this is better. But when we look at the research, unfortunately, we're missing a lot of we're missing the boat there. And another reason why I think this is because a lot of the researchers who are doing exercise, kind of the top guns that are doing exercise physiology and exercise science research are pretty against low carb diets. Like I saw this when I was in academics. Like we would go to the National Strength and Conditioning conference, and we'd be presenting our research, and people would stop by and they would just grill us. Like they really wanted to take us down. Like there had to have been a reason why we saw sports performance improvements on a keto diet. So I think some of it's dogma, right? And these folks are the ones that are receiving the funding for studies. They're the ones that are conducting most of the research. So most of what you see published is going to have at least some sort of bias to it.